afternoon, everyone. This is a meeting of the Policy Subcommittee for the School Committee. We have a few agenda items on for today, and if we finish early, then I doubt anyone would complain about that. But the first one is review approval of the minutes of the September 29th Policy Review Subcommittee. Would someone like to move? Thank you, Jennifer. Is there a second? Thank you, Stephen. Jennifer, your vote?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
And I also vote yes. All right, next up, we have preliminary discussion and review of parental notification, re-sex education. It was requested by Ms. Latas that we have a discussion about that today, and she has joined us to explain why this is something that deserves our consideration at this time. Go ahead.
So in June, the district received a grievance which alleged that the school and district implemented the sex education curriculum in a manner which violated state and federal law and district policy. So just as a review, Mass General Law 71, Section 32A, it requires that every city, town, regional school district implements a curriculum which primarily involves human sexual education or human sexuality issues, adopts a policy to ensure that parents and guardians are notified, and then also that they have the flexibility to view the curriculum as well as opt their children out. So all of that is put into place. So of course, as a result of that law, the school committee did put in place this policy, which we're speaking about today, the parental notification policy. However, it was last voted on in June of 1997, which I actually believe might be the year that the law was originally enacted. So whenever the district receives a grievance, we will analyze all aspects of the concerns, and then we're going to identify action items. So since this policy has not been reviewed for 25 years, naturally, one of the action items was to really take a look at the request that the policy be reviewed again, and then also ensure that parents and guardians have an opportunity to share their voice, and, you know, ensuring that we know that there are strong religious and moral beliefs about the issues that are covered in these educational units, and that we need to ensure that the parent voice is also respected.
Is there a sample policy draft that you've seen other districts implementing yet, or that's being circulated?
Yeah, so I'll say this, the interesting thing about our policy, so our policy in and of itself is in compliance with what's required of Mass General Law 71, Section 32A. And in fact, some of the language exceeds the requirements set forth. And specifically, what is our district policy says that we're going to notify all families in the district of any curricula that includes these topics, where the law in itself, its language implies that districts should notify families, specific families of the students who would be impacted. So let's just say 8th grade. In 8th grade health, they would cover a unit. And then, so we would notify 8th grade families. However, our policy says we're going to notify all families across the district regardless.
Do you have a recommendation one way or the other in terms of whether we should continue to be that expansive?
I actually, I appreciate, I'm not sure why. Obviously, this was a long time ago when it was first enacted. I'm not sure why the district decided to include all families of this notice, but in reviewing, in doing the different, research into the topic, the policy, the laws, I actually appreciate that we do that. It really allows all families to have notice in advance of, you know, these topics, and to plan ahead, to you know, be able to make decisions, basically what is right for their family.
Are there any areas of specific change that you would recommend at this time?
No, and just to further expand on that, and the reason that I say that about how our policy specifically says all families, specifically because we don't naturally have health curriculum in the lower grades. Parents, for example, in 5th grade might not realize at the, you know, early on that the introduction to adolescence curriculum is actually delivered in 5th grade, right? Because we don't have health associated, we don't deliver health in the younger grades. So that's why I say, I think our policy is actually quite comprehensive. Although, again, I think it's really important that we allow families to voice their thoughts and opinions as well, and have that opportunity, since it's been so long.
Okay. Jennifer and then Stephen, I see you both have some comments and or questions. Go ahead, Jennifer.
So I'm not sure, David might have just been asking this. I guess I'm going to ask it again then maybe, or just to clarify, are there any specific areas, Maria, that you think we should be focusing on to make edits and changes to this policy? That you have recommendations? I mean, I've read through it. I read through the Mass General Law. And I'm just wondering if there are specific areas you think we need to address that are lacking in our policy. So that's one question. And then I have a comment, which is just to say that at tomorrow's curriculum subcommittee meeting, we will actually be addressing as one of our agenda items, the introduction to adolescence curriculum. It would be an introductory conversation. We're not voting on anything, but it'd be a conversation and discussion about the curriculum itself, which is different than this policy, which is really about notification and opting out and you know, being able to look at the materials. So one is a comment and the other is a question. Are there specific areas you think we really need to focus on? Is there something lacking in our policy?
So do I think there's anything lacking in our policy itself? No. I think the issue in the grievance specifically really fell on implementation of the policy. And that's, you know, that's the district's requirement to address and make sure that we are implementing the policy.
So Jennifer, a follow-up question I have for you, given that you're at the nexus of policy and curriculum, is there anything that curriculum is looking to, or rather that the Office of Teaching and Learning is looking to take up around sex education that would have policy implications and would possibly necessitate revisions of the policy? One example that comes to mind, 25 years ago, we were not as progressive regarding sex education around issues of gender identity. And I'm wondering to what extent that might become a bigger part of our curriculum and whether that needs to be expressly articulated in policy.
So after we have the conversation tomorrow at curriculum and we kind of, there'll be some discussion about what the curriculum is, things that might be changing based on updating of curriculum. And so I don't know the answers to those, what those are, the specifics of that, because we haven't, you know, after the meeting, I'll have a much better understanding of it. So it's hard to say at this time, but I think that this policy is specific to compliance with the Mass General Law, as well as, you know, what we would consider probably good practice and for notification of families, but I'm not sure that that would necessarily change the procedure. This is a sort of, in some ways, it's like, you know, we're going to notify people, we're going to allow children or families to opt out. And if you are more interested in the material, so you can make an informed decision, we can provide access to that in these ways that are outlined in the policy. But what that curriculum is I don't think, at least at this moment in time, I don't think that that would cause a policy change because there's changes to the curriculum. I think the policy is specifically around the Mass General Law is specific to curriculum that involves sex ed and human sexuality issues. So I think it's already in the policy, whatever might come up. And, and again, just if in case that people are watching or curious, we're not making decisions about curriculum tomorrow. We're beginning an initial discussion about what that might be. If there are changes, what that might be. And just as a side note, I'm a conversation that sort of ongoing and has been for a period of time is, just being able to be a little bit like let me back up, requesting more information about what is the continuum of our sex ed across. So we've got some in 5th and some in 8th and sort of what that looks like. That's on the curriculum side. But I don't, at this moment in time, don't think there's anything that would impact this particular policy, but I do think that it's important that we review it. I would even say it might be good to revote it, that if we're going to look at it and really examine it, then we could update it. For example, I'm wondering if we really need to, I might say we maybe remove the sample letter. I'm not really sure that needs to be part of the policy in an effort to sort of streamline like we've been talking about. So, I would be up for looking at this and, talking with people. Are these deadlines that we've set for ourselves and the procedures we've set, things that we can do and we think are reasonable. I mean, so I would be for revoting it. I was trying to see if there was an MASC comparable policy, David, and I was having trouble just navigating the website and pulling that up myself. And we could always compare it. It does seem pretty straightforward. It seems to comply with, and to, as Dr. Litas said, kind of go a little bit beyond, what are the strict requirements? So that was a long answer to your question, but we've talked about looking at, I think this falls within the curriculum section, correct? Of the policy manual. So this would have been something that eventually we would have been looking at anyways. So if it's something that's timely, then, I think that it would be reasonable to review it and say, yes, we think this is good, and just sort of update it a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know,
Stephen?
that's my 2 cents.
No,
Sorry,
thank
you
you.
mean the sample notification letter falls within the curriculum section of the policy manual? Is that what you were saying, Jennifer?
But no, this whole policy, I think this policy, which the sample notification letter is part of this policy. And I'm just not sure that sample letters need to be part of the policy. Not that I have a problem with it being in there, and just, we've been talking about streamlining and really making our document, our policy manual, something that is navigable. Is that a word? I'm sorry. And more user-friendly. And so in that light, I wouldn't want the district to be tied to a specific letter that they might want to alter because it's part of a policy manual, and sort of just separating out what's policy versus procedure and implementation. And I think the sample letter would fall within that. But I mean, I could be convinced otherwise with a reasonable argument about why it should stay, but just really trying to make our policy manual clearer.
I think my question was answered. I just wanted to be clear that the issue that we were addressing isn't so much a policy issue so much as an implementation issue. So there's not a lot of urgency around changing the policy, although this has come up. So we're looking at the opportunity to, since it has been 25 years, we are looking at the opportunity to update this policy sometime in the future, in the near future. Is that, do I have this, did I understand correctly? I mean, there's nothing urgency, nothing urgent with the policy right now that would bring us into a necessary compliance. We're already sufficiently compliant, but there are implementation issues that are being addressed alongside this that we don't have to address in the policy subcommittee.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any further questions for Dr. Litas?
I guess I would just ask alongside that, are the implementation issues anything that we could affect, do you think, with the policy? I mean, is there any way that the policy could be constructed so to provide additional guidance to implementation, or is this just strictly having better muscle?
Better muscle.
Thank you.
All right, thank you for joining us this afternoon. And you're welcome to stay if you so choose, but we understand if you want to go on with your day. All right, so that brings us to our next agenda item, which is review of COVID-related policies, including the staff COVID-19 vaccination policy, policy on face coverings, and general interim policy on COVID-related issues. And for this, thank you very much, Ms. Laham, for joining us. If you can provide for us an overview about the current status of what we are doing in terms of handling these COVID-related issues.
Yes, thank you. We are following the health protocols that we shared in early September, following CDC guidance for those who test positive, isolating for 5 days. They can come back to school on day 6 through 10 wearing a mask. We are asking people who are symptomatic to stay home and to test. We have a lot of test kits that we have available for individuals that we can send home. We test symptomatic students at school if necessary. We are not requiring masks for most people, except in those situations of coming back to school in that day 6 to 10. Masks in all health offices and the clinics are required. We are offering regular vaccine clinics and encouraging that, vaccines and boosters as you're eligible and available. So we do a clinic at least every month, and the Brookline Department of Public Health is doing additional clinics. We continue with other mitigation strategies of hand washing. We have the enhanced ventilation that we have had, cough etiquette, those things.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Now, clearly, the policies that we currently have on the books are no longer being followed for the obvious reason that circumstances on the ground have changed substantially. And that is the main reason for having these policies on the agenda today, because we may want to refer to the full school committee for rescission of these policies since they are no longer relevant for the most part. How do other subcommittee members feel about that?
Agreed.
I think it's
Okay.
reasonable. Are there any parts of the policies, Tricia, that you think would be essential for us to retain in order for things to move efficiently and effectively, in your role as a school leader?
I think that the language that was created for the mask mandate is really good language. I forget what date that was voted on. I know it was rescinded on March 12th. It was reinstated on May 20th and rescinded on June 16th. I don't really anticipate having a mask mandate again, but it is not outside the realm of possibilities. So just to know that, this has been an elusive pandemic, and we learn that just when we think we understand it, something changes. So I think we have to be flexible in that regard. In terms of the vaccine requirement that we had, I think it's still good to have the vaccine requirement. The one thing that I think we said full COVID vaccine status will be accorded to any person 2 weeks after the final dose of the initial vaccination. And then we talk about needing people to follow through with all boosters. I don't know how realistic that is and who can possibly keep track of that. So I like the idea of continuing with the primary series as a requirement, but I don't think it's realistic to expect that we're going to know all the booster information.
I think the other element of that policy that's currently problematic is the robust testing regimen, which we're obviously no longer doing and no longer deemed necessary. So I would think that if we decide to maintain this policy, that would be another section we would look to remove.
I think I would look to remove that too. And I think we could change the testing. I think it might be reasonable to have people still do a weekly test, but the at-home test kit could be a good substitute for the PCR test, and probably a better test for this particular situation.
In the absence of having a policy, Dr. Guillory would presumably be able to promulgate various procedures and regulations around vaccines. Is that fair to say?
I'm sorry, my computer froze for a minute, so I missed the
I was just stating that in the absence of a policy, Dr. Guillory could essentially articulate whatever he feels the norms should be around COVID-related testing. And I'm just wondering to what extent we want to maintain a policy as opposed to leaving that at the discretion of the superintendent.
I think that's a good question. I think with the changing nature of things, I think keeping track of the vaccines and the testing for it has become untenable. I don't know that everybody is actually submitting tests at this point, those who have an exemption. So I think leaving it at his discretion makes sense to me.
All right, any additional thoughts from school committee members or staff? Jennifer?
How many policies these are separate policies, right? Are the masks, the vaccines, and the testing all part of one policy, or did we split them out into 3?
These are split in, well, the testing and the vaccinations are together in one, but the face masks are a separate policy. And then there was also a general interim policy that was quite broad, which was the very first one that we enacted prior to having policies on those other areas, such as face masks and testing.
I think that
So at a minimum, I would think that the general interim one, we could recommend rescinding because that already became obsolete by virtue of the 2 subsequent policies.
yeah, I think that sounds reasonable. And I think the one that talks about testing and boosters, I think I'm just not sure it's applicable in this in the environment that we're in right now, nor is it like it's almost like a cumbersome management piece that we're not sure that is happening. So I think I would be okay with that. It almost sort of sounded, listening to Tricia, that maybe keeping the mask one as like it's been rescinded, but we have it on the books. I don't know if we want to take it off, take it off, and then we have that draft. It always exists if we needed to re-vote it back in. But I don't know. What do you think? I'm not really sure.
I think another way around it, given that overall we like the language, but the issue is more that we want to maintain flexibility because we're obviously not always in an active pandemic stage, would be to alter the language toward the bottom of the policy to leave it at the discretion of the superintendent for when to implement it. That way it's still on the books, and if it's deemed necessary, we have it right then and there without needing further school committee action.
That seems wise to me. I don't think it makes sense to leave something on the books that we're not enforcing. So I think to have it available for Dr. Guillory's use if should he need it, that makes the most sense to me.
And I think with that, just so that we're clear on that, it's you're empowering me to make the decision, but that decision is being made through the recommendation of our health department partners and those types of things. So yeah, so we're going to make sure that we consult our medical professionals and Tricia's recommendation on those pieces. So that partnership, we want to make sure that we acknowledge and support that.
Now, do you have a preference, Dr. Guillory, for whether it's that you make the decision in consultation with the public health director to activate the existing policy or to promulgate any standards that you would like?
No, I think I just wanted to make sure that we're clear that that's how the decision will be made, so that it won't be me making that health department decision, but just so that we have that understanding as to what we're actually putting in place by that. So I don't necessarily know that it needs to be more explicit than that, but just so that this group understands that that's what we're saying.
Okay.
I just wanted to make one comment on the vaccination policy. I question that the other town departments don't have this as a requirement. However, the school department has this as a requirement. And then I don't have the answer to this, but I question it. How have these policies impacted specific groups, right? So our educators of color and other positions like paraprofessionals. So I think that's an important consideration as well that needs to be a part of the the conversation as far as the pros, the benefits versus the detriments of continuing to have the requirement, the vaccination requirement in place based on where we are now and the knowledge that we have. So thank you.
All right, any other thoughts, comments, suggestions?
So, sorry, so are we suggesting then, David, that we keep this on the books to be invoked at the discretion of the superintendent?
In consultation with the Director of Public Health? Yes, I think we do that. And we could even, this might be watering it down a little too much, but if we did not want to have to reenact that entire policy, but some subset of it, leave it to the discretion of the superintendent to activate portions of it. Because I'm not sure it should be an all or nothing either. That's what I gleaned from Dr.
So then what is it really doing then for us, having it at all? I mean, do we need it at all then?
Well, I think Tricia made the point that the way we define masking is helpful. So to the extent that it provides guidance for future superintendents in the distant future, I hope we have Linus for a very long time, but to the extent that it can inform future school committees, future district leadership around how to handle pandemics, it could be useful. Because one potential disadvantage of going back and forth with rescinding and reactivating is maybe it just gets lost if it's not really in the books anymore. And then we're forcing some future school committee to reinvent the wheel.
That makes sense to me.
So you're saying, David, just to clarify, that we'll leave all of them on the books or just the mask mandate on the books?
No, just the masking one. And we recommend to the full school committee to rescind the other two. So I will go ahead and.
So you're recommending rescinding the vaccine mandate for employees?
The policy, that doesn't mean that it's not still required. So the superintendent can
Okay.
still require it, or you could require it with his authorization.
Okay.
So I will move that we rescind the staff COVID-19 vaccination policy and the general interim policy on COVID-related issues, while revising the policy on face coverings to be at the discretion of the superintendent in consultation with the Director of Public Health.
Great.
And that we make that recommendation to the full school committee. Jennifer, your vote?
Yes,
I should first have asked for a second. So Jennifer, you second?
I would be happy to second your motion,
Okay.
David.
And Jennifer
vote is
votes
also-
yes.
Yes, I do.
Stephen?
Yes.
Yes, and I also vote yes. All right, thank you very much, Ms. Laham, for joining us.
Sure.
You're free to go if you so choose. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
You too.
Yeah.
All right, our next agenda item is preliminary discussion on television and newspaper media coverage of school governance and school activities as a policy area. I'm bringing this up because last week I had a meeting with the executive director of BIG. She gave me a tour of the BIG studios. I highly recommend for that all school committee members complete that tour. It was quite fascinating to me to see the complexity that goes into providing live streams and also all the content that BIG offers. BIG actually has 4 channels, but 3 of them are active now, and a 4th one is dormant. And I mentioned that because the executive director of BIG would be very interested in offering more robust programming of school-related activities and governance. So in the past, back when I was a Brookline student, athletic events were televised on BIG's predecessor, which was then called Brookline Access Television. And a lot of people actually enjoyed that. It was pretty popular to watch the high school basketball team, high school football, and it sounds like the executive director would like to move back in that direction. But even beyond the obvious of providing broadcast live coverage of sporting events, there are also the theater productions that take place that would interest the community. There are lots of other events that BIG would be willing to cover. There was a discussion with me about updating our memorandum of understanding with BIG, because in addition to broadcasting school committee meetings, as well as some school-related events such as high school graduation. They also provide learning opportunities for our students quite actively, and staff at Big assist with teaching high school students. They assist with after-school programs. So they very much are already partnering with us, and they would like to explore other opportunities to do that. Now, I don't think we currently have a policy that addresses media coverage in this sense, or the level of engagements that we might want with them in terms of school-related activities. So that's what I would like to bring up for discussion with the two of you.
What are the cost implications?
It sounds like they're not really looking for any money out of our budget. It's more that they would like a few more privileges regarding the space that they're using. So right now, Big is located on the 3rd floor of the Unified Arts Building at the high school. And sometimes they get into some turf battles with the high school because of that. So they would like some of those issues to be resolved. A specific example is that currently some students use the elevators to get to the Big studios because there are a couple of classrooms up there. And if Big is closed and students are still there after hours, that can sometimes pose a risk. There have been times where students were not particularly neat in the bathroom. That's usually used by staff for Big, so they would like to have a dedicated bathroom. So mainly issues like that pertain to facilities use.
I mean,
But it didn't sound to me like it was a financial issue. It was more about how can we cohabitate more effectively. And they would like to memorialize that in an agreement.
the only other issue that I can imagine would be privacy. So I would
Right.
assume that there'd be policy implications in drafting a release form for any student who would appear on Big related programming, but I'm sure we could take care of that with forms. This sounds like a wonderful opportunity to me.
I certainly hope that we're able to take advantage of it, because I think to the extent that we can showcase what we are doing in the Brookline schools, it would be very helpful for other efforts that we undertake. The community sometimes doesn't always know just the extent of the diversity of the programming that we have. Other examples that the executive director for Big gave was providing a forum by which students can present their projects. During the summer months, there are student interns who have worked on animations that were of really professional quality that end up getting broadcasted on Big, and sort of just showcasing the skills of our students. Jennifer?
I mean, I think this sounds really interesting. I have just a couple of thoughts. Well, I'm wondering if a memorandum of understanding might be better than a policy, although I could be convinced one way or the other. I mean, I do think that formalizing it and putting it in writing and sort of clarifying things is good. And there could be pros or cons for one over the other. And I'm not really sure I feel strongly about either one of those. I'm just not sure if it's a policy, more like you said, or more a memorandum of understanding, so that we can. Big does a lot of fantastic work for us. And if there's not a financial implication, then I do think it'd be good to formalize some of the relationship between the use of space and things like that. So that makes a lot of sense to me. I would be interested in working on that. Another thought was the media release. I think we already have a media release on Aspen that families sort of opt into, if you can take photographs of children, whether it's for, presentation in the classroom or newsletters or things like that. So maybe just the language of that media release could be adjusted within the sort of process that we have for parents to opt in and out of media release. And I was wondering if this might be a good conversation to also have with Capital, only because if we're talking about use of space, I definitely would wonder if that would be a place maybe we could even meet jointly to, even for a portion of a meeting. Not that it's rental of space, but it is use of space and sort of buildings. And I'm just wondering if they might have some thoughts around what the language might be or how we could work collaboratively. And I love the idea of, showcasing our performing arts and, athletics and a lot of our programming that we have that really makes it, even in the middle school levels, and we have a lot of student groups that are active and Model UN. And I'm just wondering, there are so many ways that we could, utilize these amazing resources and foster, opportunities for students and families to be engaged with these if they can't make it, to the actual event itself. And I'm just wondering if they're like, I don't know, student broadcasts or, used to be when I was back in the day when I was in school, we had like a morning sort of like little news presentation in the morning, and we had TVs in the classroom, and people would, do a short presentation, or like even with the weather and stuff like, there's so many applications that students could be involved in. We could be showcasing student work. We have so many amazing things going on. I just think it's a wonderful idea, and I would love to work on it. I'm just not sure if it's like a memorandum of understanding or a policy, a formal policy. I don't know. I don't know about that, but those are my thoughts.
Stephen?
I have no further comment.
Okay, so I'm very excited by this opportunity as well. The executive director of BIG is currently drafting what she would view from BIG's perspective as the ideal terms of an MOU. And we will be meeting again. By we, I mean the district more broadly, to work on those terms. And yes, I second your suggestion, Jennifer, about involving the capital subcommittee, because it sounded to me from my conversation that the main asks are around use of space. Currently, the biggest benefit that BIG derives from the schools is that they do not pay us rent for use of that space. However, from what they describe, they really are giving us quite a bit in return. And by us, I don't just mean school committee and school departments, but also to our students. They provide direct instruction. They actually equipped the various studios that our students use. They buy the equipment. So they are funding a lot. And to the extent that we can try to maximize the benefits that we derive from a collaborative relationship, I think that would be helpful. And it sounded to me like they were dangling that fourth dormant channel as a lot of opportunity for us to showcase what takes place in schools. So I will follow up on those suggestions. And this will probably be an agenda item in the near future in one form or another at one of the subcommittees and or full school committee.
Nice job, David.
Right. Thank you. So that brings us to the next agenda item, which is 2022 Fall Town Meeting warrant article review update. I put this just as a placeholder in case anyone wanted to discuss warrant articles that we had recommended to the full school committee. I will bring to your attention, in case you haven't noticed it yet, that for our workshop on the 20th, we will take up warrant articles 10, 11, and 13 in terms of whether we want to take positions on them, and if so, whether we want to support them or oppose them. And also there will be an opportunity to discuss warrant article 37 further and our position statement on it. We can also take this opportunity to discuss that. That's why I added this agenda item. So I don't know if either of you have any thoughts you want to add about any of the town meeting warrant articles.
Is the agenda for the 20th public yet?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, I think it came out today, maybe, or yesterday, or it was recently. I know I saw some information about it.
This afternoon.
Ah, there you go.
Thank you.
It would be helpful. What were some warrant articles discussed last week, right? On Thursday at full school
Yes.
committee? Does anyone have at their disposal which ones those were? I can look it up.
I'm bringing it up also.
We're this Thursday, we'll look at 10, 11, and 13, you said, David. I just want to make sure I write it down right, as
Right.
well as Article 37.
So 10, 11, 13, 37 for this Thursday.
Okay,
And then the next school committee meeting on the 27th, we will have presentations on warrant articles 30 and 31, as well as an opportunity to discuss them and determine whether we want to take a position, and if so, whether it would be to support or oppose.
Are there any other outstanding warrant articles that weren't either covered at the last meeting, this coming workshop, or the meeting on the 27th, or will that be all of them?
That would be all of them as of now, although the petitioner for 2 of the marijuana-related warrant articles has reached out to me and would like to discuss having the schools take up those warrant articles. So I haven't had that meeting with her yet. I'll try to do so soon.
Okay, so 10, 11, and 13, were these the demolition related ones?
10 was the one about preserving trees. 11 and 13 are demolition related, yes.
Right. Okay. I'm happy to discuss them now.
Okay.
I'm opening them as we speak.
David, are you anticipating that we would make recommendations to the full committee, or we're discussing them at full committee anyway, so we don't need to make our own recommendation as a subcommittee here?
Right. We don't have to make any official recommendations. This is just to provide an opportunity to discuss further if anyone would like to.
I'm having some trouble opening the files. Are you?
My current leaning is that we do not take a position on them. It seems like they do not impact the schools directly. It's more of a theoretical concern.
It does seem pretty tangential to me as well. There are certainly cases where they can affect schools, but I think even the petitioners were pretty explicit that they did not have direct bearing on schools.
Even for 11 and 13?
Certainly for 10.
Right, what's tricky with 11 and 13, so apparently 11 has that sunset provision where it's only applicable for a very limited window of time. It's really intended as an interim pause on demolitions. And their goal is to stem the tide of demolitions in a residential setting. The way that the warrant article language is constructed, however, it could apply to school buildings, but because it has that sunset provision, it appears that at most it would be applicable for about 2 years. And it does not apply to Pierce because it does not officially become a bylaw until the Attorney General's had an opportunity to review it.
That was
13,
Sorry, go ahead.
13 does not have such a sunset provision, but it was argued before us that because of the Dover amendments that it wouldn't be applicable to us anyway, only if we chose to go through Brookline zoning.
Yeah, I agree with you, David.
Were the petitioners amenable at all to like specifying that it wasn't related to schools, or no? Or
They didn't give a straight answer to that. I think I recall you asking that. That's something that I will ask them again, because that would really cinch it for me if they flat out exclude applicability for schools. That would make me more comfortable as well.
I just don't want it to affect
But
negative.
then it would be really irrelevant for us, I think.
Yeah, but I also just want to make sure that it's not going to delay or otherwise interfere with the process we normally would go through anyways in order to get the stays and to fill out our permits and do all the things the right way. I just don't want there to be any other.
I think that was Helen's point at the meeting as well.
Okay. So if it's not intended to affect the schools specifically, it would be good if they could explicitly put that in there so there's not a question. I don't know if they're amenable to that.
I obviously I can't speak for everyone in the committee, but I suspect that this is what we were all thinking, and that our hesitation had more to do with confusion over its potential applicability to PSB, and whether there was some level of complexity we may have been missing. Perhaps I'm projecting from my own experience of that discussion onto the rest of us. But I was struggling to see its applicability to PSB. And if it were applicable, then I would be less inclined to take favorable, to propose endorsing it. Because that would constrain us in a way that we already have processes set up to analyze and review.
Right, my concern was whether it applies to the schools, because when I read the goal section, it very clearly states that this is about residential constructions for them, and that's their primary motive in bringing about this warrant article. But the language itself does not restrict it to
Right,
residential.
right.
And therein lies a potential concern, and they can say what their intent is, and I'm not denying that that's their intent, but the reality is that when something becomes a bylaw 20 years from now, when you don't have the authors of it necessarily as active in town politics to explain the thinking, a future town meeting could go in a different direction in terms of interpretation.
Yeah, Mike, I'm not one of the, I agree with both of you. And I think that one of the additional concerns I had was sort of it's residential construction, but you could say a lot of our schools are in residential zones. So how do we sort of clarify what buildings are affected? And it would just be, I would feel much more comfortable if it was explicit in the warrant article. I would feel a lot more comfortable. So I'm not sure, that would be great feedback to get before we review them. If they, if someone is able to contact the petitioners and ask, that would help me to form my decision about, what I would say or how I would feel about it at the workshop. Whether or not I would want to make a statement about it, or suggest the school committee make a statement about the warrant article.
Okay, I'll do that. If they are unwilling to do so, another approach that we could take is make a statement that's not really in the affirmative or against, but just stating this concern, and that we would be more comfortable if schools were explicitly excluded, and someone at the floor of town meeting could take that up as an amendment.
Okay, that sounds like another good plan, but it'd be great if they would be amenable. Sometimes people are, and petitioners are, and they're like, oh, that's great feedback, or whatever, and others not. So that's great. Okay. And then the trees. See, I wasn't there for the presentation. Did the petitioners for 10 come last week?
They did, yes.
So I didn't get to hear that, but it sounds from both of your perspectives that that's not applicable to the schools. It's not something we need to worry about.
A mix. So the schools
Okay.
do have some residential properties. There are
Right.
homes where we provide for staff, not a lot, but there's a little bit. And also we did receive a further statement from one of the co-petitioners who was stating that schools are residentially zoned. So he now thinks it would apply to schools, but be that as it may, it's not, there's nothing in that warrant article saying you can't proceed with the project. It's just that you would have to agree to some type of mitigation if we were to remove trees in certain locations. I believe it's around the 20-foot perimeter specifically. So it looks like there is an impact, but it's very slight. And I can't imagine that we wouldn't want to replant a tree if we took one down. So I'm not too worried about it, but I will certainly circulate that statement in case not everyone's received it.
Okay, that would be great. And just to clarify, so that wouldn't affect, say, a project like Pierce. It wouldn't affect that. We're talking more about buildings we own that are residentially zoned buildings that are school property. Is that right? So like
sometimes it's literally a house. So there's a house that's near Baker that I think is used for staff, and there are a couple of examples like that around town.
there's, I think, where the Brookline Music School is, that may be a building as well, right? In front of Lincoln, which is
Yes.
the house. Okay, well, I think, yeah, I think it'll be good to discuss it at the workshop and see where people are at, but that statement would be helpful if you can circulate that, David.
Will do. Anything else on town meeting warrant articles? All right, so that brings us to new business. Any new business?
Yeah, I have a question for you, David. At the meeting with PTO members that Mariah, Nancy, and I held last week, Jesse Gray and Wendy Stahl of Ziab attended to talk about sustainability. And in response to questions from PTO members, And it was decided in response to get out some messaging quickly about ZIAB's mission and what they think PSB's priorities could be in support of ZIAB. And I was wondering if it might be possible to release a joint statement with ZIAB. Jesse and Wendy were amenable to this. And so I sent a version that mashed up a very, very brief version of what Wendy and Jesse had written with a briefer version of what Roger Grandy had written as a proposed value statement. What would be a process of releasing that? Should the school committee be interested as a statement? Would that be, would I propose that before the school committee as a statement to be released for their consideration? What could it be?
But in the past, when we've released statements, they've come through the policy subcommittee. So we did that, for example, with the statements regarding our position on SROs that came through subcommittee. And then we bring it to full school committee.
Okay, then I'd like to ask if I could possibly docket that statement for a future meeting of the policy subcommittee for
Sure,
the
we can do that.
possible the consideration of the full school committee.
Okay.
Okay.
Stephen, is it all around sustainability?
It's around sustainability education. What would be the commitment of PSB towards sustainability in Brookline? And it would be a joint statement from both ZIAB and PSB.
But we are the school committee. We're not PSB. It couldn't be, we can't
I
make
see. I'm sorry. You're right. So you're right. It would
have to
school committee.
be like
You're-
school
you're
committee
absolutely right.
values and not necessarily we can't commit the district. We can make a policy which could commit the district, but I
You're
don't know.
absolutely right. So
We
it would
need
be
to
a
like
school
think about
committee
what is the
value.
state, like who is the statement on behalf of, and I don't know. So just something to, I don't know, we need to think about that.
You're right. So I'll make sure that it reflects that.
And then regarding the sustainability policy, which I know has sort of been hanging in the ether for a while, it is on the agenda for the 27th for a second read. So hopefully we finally get that done.
For the school committee or for that's for the school committee?
School
Great.
committee, yes.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
All right, any other new business? Okay, then that concludes our meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.